Speaking of Trump, he's been very agitated and vocal about the Panama Canal and taking it back, making sure that America has operational control and access. Now I see that they're kind of signaling at the White House that we've won. Panama's on our side. America's going to control this. China's going to be kicked out. But then you start digging in, and it actually looks like BlackRock is taking over control of the Panama Canal. BlackRock is using money to buy up the different sides of entry. What's going on with this Panama Canal situation?
Oh, there's so much to say here, Stephen. Thank you for asking. And I'll start by saying I am no fan of BlackRock. In fact, the head of BlackRock, Larry Fink, is on the board of directors for the Council on Foreign Relations that we've been talking about. Yeah. And he's on the board of trustees for the World Economic Forum, which played a critical role in building up Communist China's economy, Communist China's military. And they're very proud of this, by the way. They put out press releases announcing this, so there's no secret there. So bringing BlackRock in is very, very troubling to me for a number of reasons. And we need to understand, too, that BlackRock didn't emerge as like this super company through its better business practices and through the free market. It emerged into this dominant position through its incestuous relationship with the Federal Reserve System and the federal government, going back to the 2008 financial crisis, the big governmental institutions, and of course by managing some of the bailouts. So BlackRock is not a good player, but there's really good news on the Panama Canal. I serve as senior editor at the New American Magazine, and back in the 1980s, they published some incredible articles about this, quoting actually one of our top treaty negotiators who was involved in this process. And what he found was that the Panamanians signed a different treaty than we signed, which means the signatures are not valid. This was not a valid treaty. So Donald Trump, we have made Donald Trump aware of this through a number of the key people around him. He is aware of this. I understand whether he will act on it is another matter, because I recognize the diplomatic optics of that would be a little bit controversial. But the reality is we are not bound by that treaty, because both parties, by definition, a treaty has to be the same by all parties if it's going to be valid. We signed different treaties. So Trump has an incredible opportunity here. I don't know whether he'll choose to use it, but he has an incredible opportunity here to rip that thing up. We never should have given the Panama Canal away. We built it with our taxpayer money. American men lost their lives building that thing, and the strategic and military importance of that canal is impossible to overstate. So I do hope that we are not at the end of this saga yet. I don't want to, replacing China with BlackRock is like out of the frying pan and into the fire. Not necessarily what we need, but one step further, and we can have something incredible here.
Okay. Yeah. It's been a fascinating thing to cover, but once I read that, I was like, wait a minute, BlackRock is like at the heart of, they're taking over Ukraine. They're at the heart of the DEI and, the clean energy initiative and diversity hiring, forced numbers and metrics. And so I don't know, it's all very interesting. Okay. Going back to interesting things that I saw, Tucker Carlson also had a very, very interesting interview, and it was with the owner of the LA Times, Dr. Patrick Soon-Shiong. And this guy became a billionaire by developing some really incredible cancer drugs, right? So he made his money through Big Pharma, ends up buying the LA Times, has his eyes opened with the whole COVID situation. And then once, I believe, Fauci was pardoned, he was like, okay, I can't be quiet anymore. I'm seeing all kinds of sick people that got this miracle shot. I'm seeing young children with colon cancer, which I never saw in my 30-year career. Anyway, during this interview with Tucker Carlson, he was saying that when things shut down, he told Gavin Newsom, you need to take COVID really seriously, and that Big Pharma is going to be the one that tries to hijack this narrative. And he said that Dr. Fauci and others, they're going to try to create a one-size-fits-all vaccine to end the pandemic, but they're going to be focusing on immunity when they need to be focusing on bolstering T cells, which can clear this. And then he talks about that night, he goes back, he shuts down his whole business, tells all the scientists, we're going to focus on a vaccine that will agitate the body and create more T cells, basically put the T cells into overdrive. And so he does all this. He tells the government and nobody wants it. Nobody wants it because it was too simple. And yet he gives it to his whole family, the different scientists. None of them get COVID. Is this just like an example of how, because he's not in bed with big pharma, this was shoved to the side, just like hydroxychloroquine and ivermectin? Your thoughts on all of that?
Yeah, there's something really significant about what happened during all of this that people need to understand. If there had been an effective treatment prior to the rollout of these injections, they never could have done what they did. And that is why Dr. Fauci and the rest of the clown car over at the CDC and HHS and all these agencies, which, by the way, are still holding up all my FOIA requests on this. They need to hand those over now that Robert F. Kennedy's in charge. I'll be back. If there had been an effective treatment for these things, they never could have done the emergency use authorization. And so that's why there was this ruthless suppression of anything and everything that might be promising. And we saw that, right? Dr. Peter McCullough was out there speaking about things like ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine. Boom, everything deleted. Everybody censored. Everybody kicked off all the... And that has kind of ended now. YouTube and Google and all these guys have eased up a little bit on their censorship policies. But now it doesn't matter that much, right? Now the thing's been done. 70-something% of the population has gotten this thing, but it never could have happened if there was an effective treatment. And so that's why we saw this unbelievable, really unprecedented in all of human history effort to silence anyone who said anything about possible treatments other than this injection that they eventually came up with. They couldn't have done it without that. So that's what's going on here, Stephen. And I think a lot of these people are just hoping everybody's going to forget about all that and just move on to the next thing. We have to remember, if no one is held accountable, this kind of stuff will happen again. So I cannot tell you how pleased I was to see Donald Trump question the legitimacy of these pardons. I can't tell you how pleased I was to see that over a dozen state attorneys general are looking at what Congress has put out, see if there might be state charges that can be applied to people like Fauci. We cannot forget about what happened. There must be accountability for what happened, or they will do it again. Mark my words.
Yeah, I agree with that. Remember when Florida's numbers dropped like crazy because they had this thing called monoclonal antibodies? And then the Biden administration found out about it and basically revoked the right to use those in Florida. And then their numbers spiked. It just seems like this doctor that Tucker Carlson interviewed, seems like he came up with a way to make your body create its own like miracle monoclonal antibodies through these T cells. I just can't believe, like, I listen to these things and I go, why are these geniuses being silenced? It's crazy to me. Okay, speaking of geniuses that they're trying to silence, are we witnessing a coordinated hit job terrorism on Elon Musk and Tesla for discovering and rooting out Democrat access to vast sums of taxpayer money in order to undermine the United States, our sovereignty, destroy nuclear families? What are your thoughts on all of these coordinated hits on Tesla?
There's no question that's what we're witnessing, Stephen. Elon Musk, through the work at Doge, has discovered some of the most important elements of the deep state, including, for example, the government funding for all these far-left fake media outlets, including the role of U.S. aid, not just domestically, but internationally in fomenting opposition movements and even terrorism. I mean, some of the stuff that he has stumbled on, and he himself said it, this is the stuff that people get killed over. He's exactly right. And so destroying his company for these evildoers is a very small price to pay. And we're watching terrible things happen with the terrorism aimed at Tesla dealers, with the vandalism and the horror aimed at even Tesla owners, who in many cases are like liberal tree-hugging, hippies who bought these things. We're seeing it now in Europe with the sales numbers falling off a cliff on Teslas, while the electric vehicle market continues to grow in Europe. This is a coordinated effort at the highest levels between the media, the Democrat Party, and critical tentacles of the deep state to destroy a guy who now has smoking gun evidence of their crimes and of the scams that they've been perpetrating against the American people for so long. So, I'm not a big electric car guy, but if I were, I'd be going to get a Tesla right now.
Yeah. Well, they're cutting George Soros's family off. They figured out his plan. Put down $1 million, get access to $1 billion. Wow, what a great return! And then what do? They use that money to destroy America, overturn the rule of law, flood the country with 15 million illegal immigrants. These people are not going to go down without a fight. I promise you. We're witnessing it in real time. It's sad. I don't enjoy covering it, but my eyes are open. I'm seeing this. Okay. I saw something on your X account, and I think I understand, but I believe just hearing it from you will be better. But the education department, I've not really given a lot of thought to that. My mother was a good educator, 30 years. Now, as I've dug in, I realize how much the Democrat Party has infiltrated American education. The Department of Education was basically a Democrat money laundering machine in order to keep people elected. But the question that you pose that I want you to answer, your own question, is the education American children are getting, is that the education that the deep state wants them to be getting? Because everything I've seen, education is going downhill. American children are not as smart as they used to be. We have huge counties in blue states where nearly 100% of children can't read at grade level. They can't do basic math. I just feel like, wait a minute, are they being cheated, or is this the exact education globalists want them to get?
This is exactly the non-education that the globalist deep state wants our children to be getting, and that's why this is happening. And a lot of people think that this started with the birth of the U.S. Department of Education. I wish it were that simple, but unfortunately, it's not. My latest book, actually, Indoctrinating Our Children to Death, goes back through the whole history of how this system came to be, and every one of the key players had a very specific purpose in mind, and that was to undermine the United States as an independent constitutional republic. It was to undermine the nuclear family. It was to undermine the Christian church and people's belief in transcendent morality, individual liberty, God-given rights. And this is very easy to prove, Stephen. I didn't have to connect dots or go into the smoky room. I've got the writings that these guys left behind. In many cases, books and books and books where they explained what they were doing. John Dewey was an aficionado of the Soviet Union. Horace Mann, before that, imported the Prussian system for dumbing down and creating obedient little drones. That system was born in the mind of Robert Owen, a occultist, anti-Christian communist, before Karl Marx came along, early 1800s, set up a communist commune in Indiana. So we now have several generations where students in America have been deliberately dumbed down. And I mean that in the most real sense possible. The last time the federal government did a literacy survey, they divided Americans up into 5 categories. Half of Americans were in the bottom 2 categories. That means they're basically functionally illiterate. I mean, they might recognize, be able to decipher a stop sign, but they're not going to read a Bible. They're not going to read a constitution. They're not going to read a proper newspaper article. And this was by design. That's what people struggle to understand, because we all know great teachers. We all know great principals. We all know great people who are on the school board, but we're dealing here with a system that actually was designed, and that's what people struggle with. It was designed to do what it's doing. And you don't have to believe me. You could look at the Department of Education's own data. And Trump highlighted this when he signed his recent executive order on the Department of Education. Less than 1 in 3 of the kids in these public schools are even proficient at reading or math, right? And their definition of proficiency is not what a normal person thinks of when they think proficiency. It's about as dumbed down of a standard as you could possibly imagine. So we have an existential crisis here. And the reason why kids today don't know which bathroom to go into, much less, what our founding fathers were thinking when they created the Constitution, is because they were deliberately deprived of that information. And if we're going to restore America and truly make America great again, it's going to have to involve a total revamping of this, a total 180 on a lot of these things. The fake history they're teaching our kids, the quack methods they've been using to teach reading. And there is no substitute for that. There is no path to truly making America great again that doesn't involve looking closely at education.
Okay. Tell me the title of your book one more time. I knew you had the Deep State book. I didn't realize you had another one out. What's that book?
Yeah, so this one's called Indoctrinating Our Children to Death. I have a copy of it right here. And it's actually been endorsed by a lot of Trump's key people, Roger Stone. In fact, Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth wrote a beautiful endorsement. He says we must address these issues in Alex's book. And yeah, it's called Indoctrinating Our Children to Death, Government Schools War on Faith, Family, and Freedom, and How to Stop It. It's just basically the history, how we got here, where this is going, right? People don't realize the UN now is taking an active role in education. And also, what did education look like before this system was born? And what can parents do about it to protect their own children and ultimately move our country in a better direction educationally?
Okay. Wow. I I have to admit, I live in a little bit of a bubble. Utah is a predominantly European Christian state. It's possibly more affluent than other states. Like every kid around me knows how to read, knows how to do math. So I don't see that, but then I see like in Baltimore and Detroit and Chicago and parts of California, and I go, oh my gosh, this is a 12th grade senior that's about to graduate, and they can't read at like elementary levels. It's very disturbing. And I remember reading one time that, you know, communism would try to get into the universities because the universities would become the teachers, and then the teachers, without knowing it, like a fish in water, would start teaching stuff. And now look at the schools. I mean, like you can't even have an American flag, but you can have the pride flag. You can't have prayer, but you can, you know, have genders and pronouns and different. It's like such a different world than I grew up in. I'm doing my best to help my own kids. Okay, I'm gonna pick up a copy of that book. I'm gonna put a direct link down below so that my audience can learn more about that and pick up a copy. Alex, if people want to follow you online, tell me about Liberty Sentinel and how they can follow you.
Well, thank you so much, Stephen. Really appreciate it. Easiest way is libertysentinel.org. They can sign up for our newsletter absolutely free. It comes out twice a week. And you can follow us on X, and we're lots of other places, the New American Magazine. But yeah, easiest place, just go to libertysentinel.org. You can get access to almost everything that we're doing. And I really appreciate all that you do, Stephen. Thank you very much for having me on the program.
Oh, absolutely. We'll have you on again. Thank you. And I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, sir. You as well.
Losing weight can feel like an uphill battle, especially with the American diet. From nasty seed oils that hurt us to high fructose corn syrup that makes us even more hungry. Americans have wrecked their gut health. That's where Thermotrim steps in as a smart, science-backed solution. This USA-made fat burner starts by restoring your gut health. Thermotrim has a gut bacteria found in thinner people, but not heavier Americans. Thermotrim helps restore that so you can lose weight. It supports digestion and curbs cravings naturally. Have you tried other products to lose weight and change your gut health? I know I have. For me, Thermotrim is what my body needed. Get Thermotrim to improve your gut health and start losing weight today. Visit redlineremedies.com or snap the QR code. Make sure to use code Gardner to get an additional 20% off. We all feel better when we lose weight, and I want you to live a long and happy life.